Okay. Can everybody hear me? Can you hear me, Cordy?
Yeah,
Okay.
that looks good. And I can see your screen.
Well, I'm Alan Edwards, actually looking at the screen of participants. I think I've met some of you and done some workshops with some of you. And Cordy asked me to talk about basically my life as a working tree farmer and some of the things that I do and whatever insights I might pass along. So I just want to get through this as fast as I can, if I can make it work. Okay, there we are. So just a little background on what I'm farming. We have 520 acres between Colfax and the American River. It's at the very bottom of the mixed conifer range. In fact, the bottom of the Douglas fir range is at our house, which is a little under 2,000 feet. Of our land, we have about 100 acres that's very good forest land, very good forest soils. About 300 that's okay. The forestry community calls it Site 2 to Site 3 land. And about 100 acres that's shallow, rocky. Some of it's oak woodland, some of it's just rocks. We have virtually all aspects and as many microclimates as you might find in that part of the world. It's just we're full of microclimates. So what I want to chat about is I want to talk a little bit about the history of land. I'm not going to dwell on it, but I want to touch on it because history gives us context. In Shakespeare's The Tempest, the character Antonio said, "The past is prologue." Well, for me, it's really it's who we are, where we're from, and where we're going is all reflected to a fair degree in history. So the first thing I want to do is we're going to talk about the four phases of history for my land. And the first phase is what I'll call the nurturers. And that's really the native Californians. And they were here from, we don't know for sure, but 10 to 20,000 years, something like that. And during that period, they needed the land, they lived on the land, they got everything that they needed from the land, and they tended and nurtured the land. And obviously they were sustainable in what they did because it lasted for several millennia. Sadly, the takers came and virtually destroyed the Native Americans, the Native Californians. And there's sort of three areas of takers. First, the diggers, which include my family. My family were hard rock miners in the Grass Valley area. So the miners and the railroads and all the people that supported the miners are what I call the diggers. It's kind of ironic that they called the Southern Nisenan digger Indians when they were actually the diggers. And then there were the cutters, and they initially cut whole forests to support the mines. They put the timbers down in the mines used for railroad sleepers, lots and lots of fuel wood to power the steam engines and power the railroads that haul things around. And they didn't treat the land very well. They certainly abused our land. Next, what I call the scrapers, and this really kind of started in our area, maybe around the turn of around 1900. And they were land developers. They built roads, highways, subdivisions. This picture on the left here is Interstate 80, which, among other things, is the world's longest contiguous clear cut. So they wanted to be in the forest, and because it was so beautiful, and they came to the forest and tore it down, scraped it out, so that they could live there. Life is full of ironies. Then came the foresters, and professional forestry, to a large degree, was a response to very bad forest harvest practices, like the cutters that I mentioned earlier. And they had good intentions. They wanted the supply of trees to be sustainable, but they were still focused on supporting what I think is a taker's culture, basically the standard industrial economy. My dad was a professional forester. We have a list of other foresters who have I have worked with, he had worked with, who have mentored me. This, if you can see my arrow, this little guy in the lower right-hand corner is me, probably at about age 3, something like that. So I have been for a long time, for my whole life, under, to some degree or another, the tutelage of professional foresters. After my dad bought this land in 1946, and it was definitely cut over mixed conifer forest. It was not in very good condition for traditional forestry. The Native Americans were gone, and a lot of the values that they had preserved in the land were also gone. But as a forester, he felt that he could turn this land from cut over mixed conifers and with oaks and brush to high quality conifers. And he proceeded to try to do that, and largely succeeded. So he was looking for a way to economically support the ownership of the land, and he understood the forest industry. And so he took that cut over land, he turned it into forests that look like this, so that it could produce saw logs, so that the logs could go to a mill, get turned into lumber, and finally get turned into subdivisions. In his defense, he was trying to support the ownership of the land, and he was successful. And also, in doing that, he protected it from real estate development, from the scrapers, essentially. So in the process of doing that, well, actually, let me step back a second. So we brought traditional sustainable forestry to this land. That was called sustainable management in the old days. Now we call it sustainable forestry. That's really kind of more of a politically correct term in my mind. But it does include some concepts of environmental sustainability, but it's still focused on producing saw logs to support an industrial economy, which has its problem. You're going to hear me mention that a lot. I'm kind of focused on that. So after my father bought the land, my parents bought the land. It was actually a partnership. They bought it together with other people, and they formed or they registered under what's called the American Tree Farm System. They bought it in 46, and by 48 they were a part of the tree farm system, and that system was formed by Weyerhaeuser and Georgia Pacific and the big forest companies to try to encourage private forest landowners to do the things that would keep giving them a supply of saw logs, high quality saw logs for their mills. So our family set out to turn cut over marginal forest land covered with brush and oaks, both of which were considered weeds, into productive forest, which grew saw logs, turning these kinds of pictures, just choked land with brush, too many trees usually, into land like these two. The piece on the left is actually the plot of land that I first did my forestry work for pay for back in 1961 or 60, I think. And my dad's partner and I went through and basically killed the oaks that were overstory there and took out the brush. And this has been the result. It's been harvested once in the mid 90s, and it's from a conventional forestry standpoint, it's an exceptional stand. On the right is a pine stand, young pines that I planted after fire in 2001. This is a picture probably from last year. So there was very good survival. They're doing It's a monoculture stand. They're doing what conventional forestry really wants them to do. So how did we do this? What are the tools of the trade? I want to show you some tool sets that I use. First are hand tools. No gasoline engines, no electric, none of that stuff. They're hard work. But I would have to say that if I had 5 or 10 or even 20 acres, I would seriously consider only using these tools because they're quiet, they're safe, they get the job done, and they don't cost very much. So this hand tool set and an ignition set, we'll get to one of those in a minute, would be really all you'd need. And you could just be happy. You wouldn't have to join a fitness club or anything like that. You would get your workout and have a park-like forest when you're done. A step up is power tools. And because I have more land than I can handle with hand tools, and I've invested over the years in a lot of power tools. And these are most of them. I'm going to list a few others when you get done. I want to point out that this set includes a couple real important components. It has chainsaws. It has a what's called a cutting a cutting saw. It's a weed eater on steroids. But important here is the safety equipment. This chaps and a helmet. I also wrap up Kevlar in my boots and firefighting equipment, because when you're out cutting in the fire season, you should be on edge about starting a fire. This set of work tools will get a lot of work done, but it can cause some pretty bad injuries if you're not careful. This is my burn kit. I actually don't much like burning, and didn't do it for a long time, but lately, in a time of climate change, we really have to look for ways of cutting down on the fuel load to keep wildfires out. I'm looking for alternatives to burning, but so far I really haven't been successful. And this is for big jobs, big guy. I really don't like this very much. Bulldozer like this can kill. It destroys everything in its path, but sometimes, for road work or heavy work, you have to have something heavy. And then when we're dealing with fires, particularly now that we're dealing with more and more with broadcast burning, I have more of a fire truck. I bought a tank and a pump and a live hose, excuse me, for my truck. And this works very well, actually. And then finally, there's forestering tools. The tools to do measurement in the forest, to do cruises. I've done a couple of cruises on my land under the guidance of RVFs. And if you own very much land, then you probably want to start thinking about learning how to do that kind of stuff. Other tools not pictured. I carry a pocket weather station in the summer because when the relative humidity gets below 25%, I quit. I don't cut. I figure it's too dangerous. And in the winter, if I'm doing broadcast burning, the relative humidity range is part of the prescription. So I really have to look at that and follow it very closely. These other things are other tools that I didn't show. The lawn chair is an important part of the whole equipment set, because sometimes you just got to sit down. If you're doing firework, I highly recommend cotton and wool clothing. That's fire resistant. You don't need anything fancy like Kevlar, but cotton pants and a work shirt are really important. And excellent boots. In the summertime, I use boots because I have steep slopes. I have boots with cork soles with spikes on the soles. And in the wintertime, it doesn't work very well if it's muddy, but I have lug sole boots. Also not shown, my father's axes. He grew up in a time without chainsaws, and he only really used them in my lifetime to cut firewood. He was an axeman, and he would go out and do his work. Now, he didn't do as much work as I did. He worked under the concept that if you thinned the trees and the crowns were up above the brush, you let nature take its course. I have found that's not sufficient. He used herbicides, as did I when I was younger, in a process called hack and squirt. which we would chop basically holes in the bark around the base of a tree and squirt in what's now called Agent Orange, 2,4-D and 2,4-5-T mixed. We didn't know it then, how bad it was. I've dabbled in killing brush with herbicides after I purchased the land, but I quit. I've had one cancer I really don't want anymore. And finally, sort of just some things for myself. Good nutrition is good. My doctor tells me that my activity level on a day-to-day basis is about that of a high-end endurance athlete. For me, a senior endurance athlete. So I eat pretty well, high quality food anyway. And then I think about safety constantly. A small accident will take you out. You cut yourself pretty well, you're out for a week or so. A major accident may take you out for months or may take you out permanently. So you really don't want accidents. So what do I do? What are the activities that I do? This is kind of the list. In the main, I concentrate on thinning and weeding and burning that slash that's created. We do regeneration. We've probably planted between 15 and 20,000 trees on the land since my ownership. But for the most part, we have too many trees, not too few. And so one of our biggest tasks is thinning the trees. And in fact, I, like most serious tree farmers, have a hard time thinning them enough. We're too optimistic. Oh, that tree might have some potential. Maybe I should leave that. The overwhelming majority, as I said, of the work is thinning and weeding, cutting, pruning, piling, and burning. Almost all of this is done by the ground, on the ground. I really don't use equipment to do this. I've tried using my dozer some, and I never did like what it turned out, and I didn't like what the dozer did to the land. So I'm on the ground a lot, on steep ground. Well, I like to say I have a lot of flat ground. It's just hardly any of it's horizontal. So I'm working on steep slopes a lot. A few rules that I have learned in working in the woods. Bring toilet paper, most important thing. Food and water are huge. Cut uphill and let what you cut fall away from you down the hill. Let gravity be your friends. Burn piles from top to bottom. That way, if the fire escapes, it doesn't have much to burn as it goes up the hill. Plus, the smoke won't be in your face quite so much because it tends to go up. I start early. I actually don't rest enough, but that's the theory anyway. I should quit before I get exhausted. And unless people don't like you, you should let them know where you're working in case something happens. My work timing in the fall, or in the spring, lately there's been a lot of cleanup from winter storms and sometimes road scraping. We do some now increasingly some spring broadcast burning. In fact, Cordy and Chris Paulus are roping me in to do some more. I don't thin Douglas fir in the spring because there's a disease called black stain, which is carried by root feeding bark beetle that's active in the spring. I do it other times of the year, but not in the spring. And then cut, prune, pile, burn. I make cover piles or starter piles, which I cover for my wintertime burning, and then maybe occasionally enjoy life. Summer, it's kind of the repeat: cut, brush, prune, build the cover piles, and then hide from the heat in the afternoons. Fall, same with the brush. I cross trench the roads after the first rainstorm, when the ground's a little damp. Do other prep for the wet season. I don't start burning until I have quite a bit of rain, and it depends. For pile burning, I'm a little more careful about fires on pile burning, mainly because it takes a lot of work. If you're pile burning and it's dry condition, you've got to stay longer until the pile burns down. It just takes a lot of time. I'd rather have it wet enough so I'm not too worried. But fall broadcast burning can be a really good thing. Wintertime, pile burn, broadcast burn, enjoy your life, and then go out and burn some more piles, because that's a relentless requirement of what you're doing. Of course, we do periodic timber harvest. If you didn't know, you can't sell forest products without some sort of permit document. The state will not let you do that. If it's a small piece and you're just doing firewood or you're doing some salvage, you can get a what's called an exemption. But anything serious, you need a professional forester, and it's going to cost you some money. We got our first timber harvest permit in 1973. It was 1 page long. We got what's called a non-industrial timber management plan, which is a perpetual harvest permit in 1993. I think we were the first in the county. We still use updated versions. That document is 250 pages long, and if you got it now, it would be even bigger. It would cost tens of thousands of dollars for sure. For big harvests, we hire logging contractors. And for smaller ones, though, I am a licensed, it's called a timber operator's license that I have, and I'm a licensed logger, so I can do it myself. And I have done some, but nothing big, mostly firewood and some poles. I do not enjoy timber harvesting. Actually, one of the big things about it that bothers me the most is sometimes it breaks my heart to see the trees that have been a part of my community get cut out and sent off to feed the industrial economy, and it's just not, it doesn't feel very good. But timber harvests have been really the only way, or the only significant way we've had of supporting the ownership. If it wasn't for timber harvesting, we wouldn't own the land. It's really that simple. So that's what I've done for 47 years of ownership, and another 15 before that, where I was involved, certainly working. But now I want to kind of switch gears, because there's things happening that are changing really everything for me. The wildfires are getting bigger, and if you can see if I can get my pointer on, if you can see the acres burned between 2002 and 2011 are a little over 2 million. And I lost my pointer again. Between 2012 and 2021, it almost quadrupled. The fires are getting bigger. They're getting more destructive. They're not necessarily more frequent, but it's a horrendous situation. And one of the consequences of that is that the sawlog market is so flooded with salvage logs that there is currently no market for my logs. We've had fires. So in 2001, we were burnt. About 100 acres of our land was burnt by the Ponderosa fire. There were articles in the newspaper because we had the shaded fuel break in place that they used to stop, Cal Fire used to stop the fire. The picture on the right is of the mosquito fire from last year that was on the divide just right across the river from us. We were evacuated, but it did not come to our land. We were evacuated actually 3 times last year for wildfires. And then now also comes what's called the zombie forest. And what this is climate change is visiting the forest. It's finally arrived. And a study that just came out of Stanford's Woods Institute is telling us that if climate change is the minimum of what the climate change people are hoping for, 1.5 degrees Celsius warming, it will still kill about 20% of the forest. And we focused in a low altitude conifer belt, which we're right in the center of. I actually, in a former life, I was an economist and a climate change analyst, and I don't have any hope that climate change is going to stop at 1.5 degrees Celsius. I think it's going to be more like 3 or 4. Anyway, that is coming to us. And in fact, it's already arrived for us. So we have a Douglas fir die-off. You can see the dead trees here, and a pine die-off. It has not really affected our oaks. They seem much more resilient. But what it means for our management is our trees are dying. Our forest is at great risk for destruction by fire. There's no market right now for logs, either green or salvage. And as long as we have sort of an ongoing series of big wildfires, it's doubtful that there will be much of a market. So here's where I might get offensive to some people, and if I am, I don't really apologize. I guess I don't do that much, but it's just the way it is. The response from traditional forestry to what I'm experiencing, I'll give it to you straight. Traditional forestry tells me to plant conifers that may be more climate resilient. The tree on the right is a good example of that this is a Coulter pine, Jeffrey pine cross. It's probably more drought resistant, maybe more heat resistant. This I got talked into under the sort of the same rubric, and this has no business of being on my land. I planted them, but it's ridiculous. This is a Sierra redwood. This might do fine. I believe that's a gray pine. So it might outlast everything. The traditional forestry tells me to thin to much wider spacing than I have, and that's fair. My spacing is I have too many trees. At my best, I have been spacing according to sort of traditional forestry practice, which is a D+4, D+6 rule, something like that, if you guys know what that is. Now, the sort of recent popular practice is to thin to 35 or 40 feet, which is more than what these trees are. I think that may help some stands survive longer, but I've been studying climate change and sustainability and forestry for a lot of decades now, and I think in the end, the only conifers that are going to be left on my ground are pockets in very shaded, moist ravines, probably. The other thing that traditional forestry is telling me to do is masticate. Send those machines out, grind up stuff. And the question is, well, what kind of problems does it leave? And in both of these pictures, you have a mastication mat that's very thick on the ground, because the material they ground there was a lot of it, a lot of BTUs. Mastication doesn't get rid of any of those BTUs, it just puts it on the ground. If a fire came through these stands, even in the wintertime, at a dry period in the wintertime, it would kill all the trees. In the summer, absolutely, it will incinerate everything. In the summertime, this mastication mat on the left would probably lead to 20 to 30 foot flames. So in my opinion, just me, conventional forestry has not provided solutions to my problems. They're aware of them, and I think they're as troubled as I am, but they're just somehow they're not on top of the game yet, and I hope they get there. I have gone through stages of anger, grief, depression, and have really kind of wondered, what am I going to do next? This has been my life. So this kind of represents pretty well where I am, and explains, I guess, emotionally anyway, why and I think we in general as forest landowners need a new paradigm. So that paradigm is for me, this is my term, a forest transformation. Somebody may come up with a better one, but for now, that's all I've got. And then comes the question, well, how do we do that? How do we transform from what we have, which is being burnt up or is dying because of climate change, to a forest that will survive climate change here? How do we transition to a new forest that's climate resilient and that's resilient to forest fires? And this is an important one, a forest which, in a time where there may be no value for conifer saw logs, this forest still has a value to people in an uncertain time that I think we're coming into. And then the question, well, how do I protect this forest? Because if I don't work hard, or if somebody doesn't work hard to protect it, it's just going to burn up, or it's going to, climate change will hit it as well. And how do I and others learn to live with it, this new forest, and in it? I think in it is a key thing. And the most important question of all is why? Why would I do this? Why can't I just accept the fact that I failed to protect the forest and protect this passion of my life, and I worked at it and it didn't work out? And I could just walk away, but I'd have to know that I let this thing that I truly love wither and die. And I don't think I want to sell out to real estate developers and walk away so that a bunch of mini mansions get put all over the land, because in fact, there's some awesome views on the land. So I stay because I've had a hard time trying to articulate this slide, but I'll give you my best. I have a loyalty to the land, and I really have felt for a long time that as much as anything, I serve the land. And I want to make sure that the land and the forest is still valuable, even after all that's happening, and even if there aren't any saw logs. And this value is also an expression of what I call my misanthropic humanism. I don't much like the industrial economy and the industrial society that it's spawned, but I have great empathy for people in the third world and people that are poor, who are affected by climate change and driven out by wildfires and all of that. It just tears at my heart. And I'm bloody stubborn, and I just have a hard time giving up. Fortunately, I have a community to help me with this transformation, what I'm calling. My mentors in fire and fire ecology, there's two main people. Chris Paulus, which I think a lot of you know on the right, is one of the best. He's a retired CAL FIRE battalion chief, but he's one of the best prescribed fire practitioners in the North State, maybe in the country. I don't know. He is superb, and he's just taught me so many things. He's been my mentor, as has Cordy Craig, who's sitting just over there. Hi, Cordy. Cordy is, she said I was a hard worker. God, she is an incredible worker and knowledgeable and wants to learn everything. And I've just valued her tremendously and gained a lot from my association with her. But there are other people for a long time, we were also in organic farming. And so the UC Extension community has been very important to me. You know, this is Dan Macon, Roger Ingram, and Cindy Fake, our UC Extension advisors here in the area. And this was my main trainer for organic farming, Mark Van Horn, who was the overseer of the student farm in UC Davis. And we lived in Davis, and I trained there for a while. And I've also taken the time over the last 6 months to try to learn new skills, one of which is permaculture design. I took an advanced course in permaculture design from Oregon State University. I just finished it last month to see. I had some sense that they had new ways of looking at things, and I think they do. So I'm pretty happy with that. It's given me perspectives. I haven't digested all of it yet, but that's a part of the formula. I'm not sure where we are. So all of us together are trying to develop a new approach. Oh, I turned my page wrong. We're trying to develop a new approach, a new forestry with a new purpose that values the ecosystem here more than the economy out there. It values people here more than money out there. It tries to build fellowship with the land and fellowship among the people who are caring for that land. Stewarding is one term. And what we need is a new way of looking at value in relation to the forest, not looking at the saw logs, but maybe looking at the acorns, not looking at huge equipment that can just rip through and do all sorts of things in a very short amount of time. Good things, some, bad things, a lot. Maybe looking at some more traditional approaches to working the land, some more agrarian approaches. Probably not monoculture forests like my father wanted, to be honest, but maybe these, some mixed forest, but dominated by oaks, or just oaks, with the plant set that comes with them, because going forward, they produce something that we will always value, which is food. Pretty hard to eat a pine tree. This is going to this new management, new approach is going to require a different approach to management. No, not really a plan for producing more timber, because we're moving away from that. Rather, a permaculture plan or something like that that includes all the resources the land has to offer, and it tries to sustain the whole ecosystem, not a single resource, and tries to gather a community that's local, serving local needs, and not a global economy, looking to nurture rather than exploit. It might mean new enterprise activities, and this is a representation of an opportunity to grow food on land that no one really, up until now, has considered food growing land. So on the left, the fir trees are dying. There's a dead one there. There's a couple dead ones there that don't show up very well. But the oaks, these are canyon live oaks that are doing just fine. So in that, what I call a tree pod, the canyon live oak can be nurtured, and we can plant other what the permaculture people call part of a food guild, or food farming, that work in conjunction with the oaks. We may do some water collecting, but maybe just let the soil collect the water, and do as much as we can to build up the soil. Because really, looking at it conceptually anyway, the land that I have can become, with a lot of work, really a food garden with significant value, going into a time when, from all my study of climate change, it is telling me that the world is going to face some major food shortages during the rest of this century. Wildlife protection is still going to be important. We'll do a lot of cutting, burning, piling, and broadcast burning. This is my lovely wife, who is out. She's a pyromaniac at heart. We're going to learn new skills, both in the field and in the classroom. Add new friends to the farm, I hope. Take up new activities. Actually, we did have a relatively successful salad vegetable farm for a while, or salad vegetable enterprise for a while. We had to cut it off when we faced too much pollution from the sewer plant upstream from us, but that hopefully is in control now. Polish up on new skills. Those two pictures were before I had my beard, but it is me. Well, the guy in the back is me, not the guy in the front. And produce a wealth of new values from the land, all sorts of things that we can produce. And shift to a philosophy that looks for sustainability in the ecosystem, not just production forestry. So this is Chris Paulus, who just lives just over the hill and wanders over and does positive things. One of his projects is restoring this into a productive alpine meadow. And sometimes maybe just stop and smell the flowers. Maybe I should call this the one tree revolution, transforming the forest and my life one tree at a time. Because the bottom line is that our current generation needs to protect and preserve this place for everything that's to come from it in the future. And that's my mission, to protect and preserve for the next generation, for these guys, and the ones that follow them and on as far as we can see into the future. So that's my presentation. I wanted to give time for questions or answers if you have them. Cordy, I don't know how I do that. Do I just sit here and look pretty, or am I supposed to push a button or something?
No, you can pretty much sit there and look pretty. We'll just kind of, if anybody has questions, I generally prefer that folks are able to turn their mute button off and answer them and ask them themselves. Otherwise, you're welcome to use the chat box. Is there anybody that has a question? Theo, I see that you turn your video on.
Hi, yeah. Thanks, Alan. That was great. Such a
Theo, how are you?
comprehensive analysis. Good to see you.
So what's your question?
I am wondering about brushland chaparral management. If you have any places you save as chaparral, or and then also second question, do you cut all the shrubs under your forest lands, or do you leave pockets, or how do you manage the understory that's important to the system?
Well, in answer to the second question, to be honest, I don't get to all the brush. So there are pockets that I haven't gotten to. And I typically like to leave some of those, intentionally leave some of those near the springs. We have like 17 perennial springs on our place. None of them are very big, but they're tremendous wildlife support. So we leave some. In a food forest going forward, some of those brush species are food production species. So the white-leaf manzanita and the toyon and a lot of the understory plants, I think can be developed. The Native Americans certainly used them for food. And also what was very important from a food standpoint to the native Californians were the geophytes, the bulbs in the ground, the corms in the ground. So just to keep brush for the sake of keeping brush, except for maybe some habitat, probably not so much. I view a lot of the big brush fields that are out there now as more a result of fire mismanagement than of active management. And I don't know, we can look at Native American land tending for a model, and I don't know that they tried to keep brush fields, but maybe they did. I would have to talk to some experts on that. But for me, I've been fighting brush for 60 years of my life or more, and it would be kind of hard to say, oh, nope, brush is my friend now. Does that help?
Yeah, that definitely, I mean, I have some fundamental disagreements about brush and chaparral, but it really helps me get a clue in how you manage your forest, and it looks like it's really well managed, and I just appreciate your time.
Well, thank you. I will say that for a time back in the early 2000s, we had a herd of meat goats, and some of the brush species, particularly the Ceanothus species, were immensely valuable as a browse for those goats. So for people that are going in that direction, brush can be good. And two of the most valuable brush species for that were sweet birch and actually Himalaya berries. They're both very high in protein. Himalaya berries are high in protein all year round, sweet birch in the spring and summer. So it needs to be looked into. It's not high on my radar, but I respect people like you. I know you're a CNPS person, and you have a lot more knowledge about a lot more plants than I do. So if you find values there, I think that's to be respected. More questions? Any answers?
Alan, hey Alan, this is Lewis from the RCD.
Yeah.
Fantastic presentation. I loved it. That was really interesting. I hadn't really heard the whole backstory on the property, so that was cool to see.
Alan's sitting in your office right now, Lewis.
I know, I noticed. That's my desk right there.
And I should say to everyone that Lewis Lewis, along with Cordy and others, have been part of the teams that come up and help burn on our place. So I really appreciate that. So what's your question or your answer?
I was just wondering, there you showed those slides with the different tools, tool sets, and I was wondering about one of the tools in I think the first slide of tools. It has like a curved blade. I just was wondering what you use it for, what it's called.
Wicked brush hook. Yeah. Hang on. We'll get to it. So you're talking about this dude right here. The red-headed. That's called a brush
Yes.
hook. And actually, that was the favorite cutting tool of my dad. Not that particular one. He had a better one than that. And the value of that is you want a razor sharp edge all the way along here. But when you're cutting, particularly when you're cutting brush and things that are down close to the ground, that hook keeps you from getting that razor sharp edge into the ground. So it'll stay sharp longer. You can also use it to sort of hook off brush. That takes a lot more skill, but just right off the bat, you can cut on or near the ground with that thing. You can cut straight down into a live oak sprout or something like that, and the hook will keep the blade sharp. So it's very helpful in that sense.
Oh, cool. Wow. Thank you. That's interesting.
Yep. And it will cut off parts of your foot if you're not real careful.
I'm sure.
Yep. Any other tool questions? I kind of went through these tools pretty fast, but notice there's 2 chainsaws because I like to juggle them occasionally. And I still have my hand, so I guess I've been doing it okay.
Hey,
No, I don't.
Sarah, I saw that you had started to say something. Do you have a question?
I have 2. They're not about tools. Sorry. I wish they were. It's more fun. I'm wondering, so you're talking about, climate change and forest change progression. Are there any kinds of education resources that you could recommend to understand how, can I know what my forest will look like in 40 years to try and make a plan now to encourage, a structure that will still be viable?
Well, I would, the best thing I can think of is go to this article, which was published in Nexus, the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science, Nexus. I have not seen the full study, which I really would like to do. It came out of the Woods Institute at Stanford, but the article that was published in Nexus has a map of where they think it's going to be the worst, and it's a belt along the low altitude mixed conifer area of the Sierras and the Cascades. So that would be a start. I don't think there's like a book that says, "Ooh, here's what's going to happen to your forest." Maybe somebody should write one. But sadly, in general, what altitude are you at? I kind of forget now.
4,200.
Well, you're up a little high, and you're up above Nevada City. Is that correct?
Above Georgetown.
Oh, Georgetown. The way climate change works in concept is for every degree Celsius warming, conceptually, you're going to get a 500 foot in elevation raise in the environment. So the bottom of the fir range at my place is right about 2,000 feet, and a degree and a half Celsius increase in warming would shift that environment upslope 750 feet, which coincidentally our land goes up to 700 feet in elevation shift. So it shifts it off our land. You're also for every degree Celsius increase in warming, the environments shift northward about 75 miles. You're a little south of us. I would suspect the bottom of the fir range is a little higher where you are, not too much higher, but maybe 2,200 feet. On average, it's going to vary depending on what canyon you're in. But you're up a little higher, so you might be okay for longer. But if the climate warms up to 3 or 4 degrees Celsius, it's going to come to you. Is my that's the best I can say is from being a climate change policy analyst and writing about climate change. That's my take. I'm not a licensed climate change anything, or I'm not a licensed forester, but that's just what I think is going to happen. That you too should be thinking about eventually, or maybe your people that come behind you on the land should be thinking about transforming the land. But that's just me.
That kind of leads into my second question of transforming the land. There's no value in forest saw logs, but I think I have 14 million board feet of them. So,
14 million board feet is
so
a
what
lot
should
of
us
value.
forest landowners, how do we be landowners? Like, how can we have any semblance of economic just sustainability, coupled with, I don't need to make money. I just want a healthy forest, but I also can't pay $1 million to create a healthy forest.
Well, golly, Sarah, that is an excellent question. I'm glad you asked that question. That's the one I'm grappling with.
Right.
We have about
Answer it.
we have about half as much as you have, but
Well,
still,
you've logged, we haven't. So
yeah, we have, but still, we on the ground by our inventory and growth analysis, we have between 6 and 7 million board feet. That was supposed to be our long-term healthcare fund, and now it appears to be valueless. So it's been an emotional hit, but it's been a huge financial hit too. And I suspect what's going to happen is that we're going to get periods in the future where we have a market. So, for example, we've had, in case anybody hadn't noticed, we've had pretty good rains this year. And so we might not have as much in the way of wildfires next year, and maybe not even the year after, because a lot of the big wildfires are driven by precipitous drops in live fuel moisture, which comes from deficits in ground moisture. And so if we have a couple of years without any huge fires, and there weren't any huge fires, well, the mosquito fire, which almost burned you out and almost burned us out, that was pretty big. But there were fewer huge fires last year in California. So if we have some good years without those big fires, the salvage wood is either going to be logged or going to deteriorate to the point where the mills don't want it, and if there's any building going on, they'll want more green lumber. So there might be a market that comes back, and there might be a market in China. That varies kind of independent of our economy to some degree. So there will be times, I think, when there will be a market for logs. I just don't think there'll be as many times. So you should be ready. I don't know. Do you have an NTMP on your land?
yeah.
Well, you're ready then. That's one of the values of an NTMP is once you have it, you can start logging with a notice in, I don't know, like almost instantly. So your forester has to do some background work. He has to update the environmental stuff, all the ESA stuff on it, but it can be done real fast. So 14 million board feet, you're not going to log with an NTMP, but you might be able to log half of it if you're real aggressive. So
Maybe my forester was exaggerating too. That's just what I have on the note.
Did he do an inventory? Did you do a cruise?
Did a while ago, but maybe he was
Yeah.
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 Is there any, and I know we're kind of at time, but do you think that, or you, Cordy, anybody, is there anything these landowners can do to kind of help advocate for additional outlets for our products besides just saw logs? Like, what's it called?
Yeah.
Biomass pellets. I mean, those are just a couple I know of, but how can we advocate? How can we help?
Well, there's a lot of, and other folks, please feel free to chime in here because this is a pretty significant issue is just how to deal with the amount of biomass we have without any type of market for it. I do know that they're creating biomass facilities that, particularly in Camptonville is the one that I know about, that they're creating a biomass facility that has actual shops associated with them so that they're continuing to generate income while processing logs in the forest. Another thing that, and Lewis, feel free to chime in here. I know that there's pretty significant movement toward small community-led sawmills. And if that's a possibility, I encourage communities to get into it. This, though, of course, is not my expertise, but yeah, I follow policy, I guess, and try to back certain biomass facilities that are being made. I know that there has been movement in the past to create a biomass facility up in Truckee for Placer County, but again, I'm not an expert on this. Lewis, do you have anything to add?
No, I think you said it well. I mean, there's not really one golden answer. But yeah, I think biomass could be a really good potential, but there's just not the infrastructure right now. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I do keep hearing about small sawmills popping up. So I think if we get that going more, that has more potential, but who knows how far it'll go.
So if I can chime in, back in my other lifetime, my other career, I was a economist with the California Energy Commission. And when I first started in the late 70s, we were doing a lot of work with biomass energy. And there was a period where it was very successful. I think we got to over 100 plants in the state, 110, 120. And then they went through what they called the 11-year cliff, where the rates changed on them when they got to be over 10 years old. And most of those plants went out of business. And there have been a couple other waves where they've come back sort of and then gone out of business. The economics is very tough. The harvest costs and haul costs are crucial in a biomass plant, as is the need to have a valuable use for all the heat that's generated, not just the electricity. The heat, you gotta get some return on all the products that plant's producing, and it's tough. It's really hard. So the plant has to be close to the source of the biomass, and they have to have really good pricing, which means the Public Utility Commission, in all likelihood, has to be involved, and so they have to have a favorable attitude. And it's, it ought to happen. There's a lot of potential because there's a lot of biomass. And people have been talking about it one way or the other. They've been optimistic and pessimistic for 45 years. So I wouldn't hold my breath on it. And I don't know how you promote it. I don't know. I wish I had a good answer because it would help me too. Sorry to not be more optimistic.
Yeah, Sarah, those are great questions. I'll also add, just for managing property, and obviously I don't have property to manage myself, so that's why I primarily work with private landowners. And I do firmly believe that there are a lot of community members, particularly young people, that are motivated to work because we're all focused on self-preservation in some way, right? So if we help our community, that in turn helps us. And I do believe there are folks out there that want to work the land that don't necessarily have their own. It's not going to be the absolute solution, especially for large landowners like you and Alan, Sarah, but I think they're there, and I think we just have to find them. And that's why these PBAs and these community groups, I think, are going to become a lot more effective at generating fuels reduction and land management at larger scales. So anyway, we'll see. I'll come to your property, Sarah.
And I guess a final note on that question that I would have to add is in my opinion, there's a wide array of potential saleable products in the forest. That potential has not been tapped here in the Western Slopes Forest to any degree. So, for example, poles and log cabins and posts and just there's potentially a lot of money that could be made with fairly low capital operations, but it has to be tried and perfected, and it's not something I'm going to do. I'm focused in a different direction, but it needs to be done. So maybe you start a log cabin business. I don't know. 14 million board feet would make a lot of log cabins. You're up on some pretty good ground. It would probably be some really cool log cabins. So go for it.
We'll see. Yeah, it's just interesting because I think it's not just me, it's the whole state. We all have so much.
Oh yeah.
Just created this giant problem for ourselves.
Well, we have a bloody housing shortage. And then we have all this material up there that can be used to build houses sustainably. What are we thinking? Just me.
Anyway,
Is
So,
anybody else? Oh, go ahead.
And
I was just saying, great talk. Thank you, Alan.
oh, thank you so much.
Any other last minute questions? Otherwise, Alan, I actually do have one last thing for any smaller private landowners, and I'm thinking those under 20 acres who are feeling overwhelmed with the amount of fuels reduction work, either financially or labor intensive, or labor intensity. What would you recommend to them? What's a piece of advice you'd give them, since you've been working a large piece of ground for a long time?
Be very systematic. Go out and start doing it. You're only going to get a little done every day, every hour. I think it's really good to get one piece of ground pretty much done. You can't burn in the summer, but you can cut, prune, and pile in the summer and be ready for winter, and just work your way through, in part because you will be able to look back and see the aesthetic value of what you did. That's one of the prizes that you get is, oh, I did that. That's mine. It looks good. And just keep working at it. Me working with power tools, chainsaws and such, I can cut, pile, and burn an acre in, I don't know, 40 to 60 hours, something like that. It takes a while to get in shape, but then I'm not working as fast as I did when I was younger, 65 or so. So if you get in shape, particularly those of you who are younger, Theo and Sarah and some of you other people, you can get an awful lot done on your weekends. You could, if you can do an acre in 100 hours and you can put in 500 hours a year, that's 5 acres a year. That would take the place of your fancy exercise program, your gym that you go to, but it would be better in so many ways. So just be systematic and dogged and keep with it, and you'll be amazed at what you do.
Awesome. Thanks, Helen. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. If you have follow-up questions, either feel free to email them to me and I'll pass them on to Alan, or we'll get you in touch. But otherwise, enjoy the rest of your night. We still have some sunlight left. And I'll see you next time. Thanks.